Hi, I'm Dr. Wilson. I'm a PhD molecular biologist, and welcome to another COVID debunking video. This week, I'm talking about Steve Kirsch. Steve Kirsch, the millionaire tech bro turned prolific anti-vaxxer. But for now, we're going to be talking about the time where earlier this year, he embarrassed himself in front of a panel of experts. He, of course, doesn't think that he embarrassed himself, but that's his delusion. I'm talking about the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices. This is a committee that regularly holds meetings in regards to vaccine science and recommendations. These meetings are completely open to the public and include a portion where the public are allowed to sign up to give a public comment or question to the board. Listening in on these meetings is always super informative and can be really useful in helping to keep up on vaccine science while listening to some experts, which is why when I was listening to this meeting back in May, I was really surprised and just found it really hilarious to hear Steve Kirsch's voice coming through during the public comment sections to say things that are just absolutely ridiculous, and in the process embarrassing himself with some of the stupidest statements I've heard in anti-vaccine communities for a long time. So without further ado, let's get straight to listening what he said and talking about it.
Next, we have Mr. Stephen Kirsch.
Hi, my name is Steve Kirsch. I'm Executive Director of the Vaccine Safety Research Foundation. I have no conflicts. I urge you not to approve the boosters because we now have new direct observational data that shows very clearly that the vaccine is killing more kids than it saves. Someone needs to mute, please. Can you stop my time, please?
Off to a very cringy start.
I appreciate that. But you should not take my word for it, just like you shouldn't take their word for it. There's a simple reality check that every member of the committee should do before this vote to find out who is telling you the truth. And you must do this research because the CDC death data for those under 25 is not complete for any date after January 2021. And the CDC death data does not indicate suspected COVID vaccine deaths. There's no post-marketing data on this.
Yeah, none of what he just said is true at all. Ever since the vaccines were rolled out to the public, there has been post-marketing research, and there have been several papers published on the results of these post-marketing research surveillance systems. For example, 2 months before this meeting happened, there was a very big paper published describing the data from two very large post-market surveillance systems. One is VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, which Steve can't shut up about, and vSafe. This paper included data analyzed from December 14, 2020, all the way through to June 14, 2021. This is a proper analysis of VAERS and vSafe, where the researchers actually followed up on each and every report, looked at medical records, death certificates, and any information that was available to them for these patients in order to determine whether or not these events were even real in the first place, and then determine whether or not they could accurately be described as a vaccine injury. The researchers did not just take the reports at face value like Steve does. They use the database correctly. They follow up and make sure that they can use these reports for science. And the findings of this paper were that after analyzing data for more than 298 million doses across the first 6 months of vaccination in the US, they concluded that most reported adverse events were mild and short in duration. And yes, this study included an analysis of over 4,000 deaths that occurred following COVID vaccination. And the researchers concluded that there were no unusual patterns of death among the death reports that they received. These results are consistent with study after study after study of how this vaccine performs safety-wise across a wide population. They all find that they are extremely safe and that they are not responsible for thousands of deaths or even hundreds of thousands of deaths, as Steve likes to insanely claim. But we're not even at the part where Steve really embarrasses himself. Let's keep listening.
The best way to get the data that you need is to do your own post-marketing survey. Fortunately, there's an easy way for you to do this. Here's what I did.
Here it comes. He's going to say it. He's going to say something really stupid.
I have hundreds of thousands of followers on social media. I asked my followers, do you know any kids who have died since January 2021? Since January 2020, how many have died from COVID? How many might have died from the vaccine? Recall shouldn't be a significant bias because the child death from either COVID or the vaccine is an event nobody forgets. So even if there's a bias towards recalling more recent events, the bias of both options equally.
And there it is. He is actually telling a panel of vaccine experts that he did a social media survey to his followers, and that's how science is done. Wow. Okay, Steve, first of all, your survey suffers big time from selection bias. You are putting a survey out to your followers. You are a prolific anti-vaxxer. Anti-vaxxers are going to follow you and give you stories about how someone they know died of a COVID vaccine, regardless of whether or not it's true. This is like walking into a public viewing of The Room and having Tommy Wiseau himself come and ask the audience, what's the greatest movie of all time? And 50% of them say The Room. This doesn't mean that 50% of the population thinks that The Room is the greatest movie ever made, even though it's true. Fight me.
What a story, Mark.
But seriously, this bias reveals itself in several ways in Steve's survey. For example, in this comment, he goes on to say that 0 of his respondents said that they had a kid who died from COVID. Meanwhile, here are the numbers for pediatric COVID deaths in the US. Meanwhile, there is not a single confirmed case of death caused by a vaccine in children. If Steve really cared about saving the lives of children, he would probably be a little more concerned about these numbers instead of the numbers associated with his fake, flawed, and stupid surveys.
There were 0 reported deaths from COVID, but there were 11 deaths that were judged to be vaccine related. All 11 deaths were in previously healthy kids. 40% of the deaths happened in the first 7 days after vaccination.
Judged how? By the person responding to the survey? Really? That's the best you got, Steve? No. If you were honest about this, you would do a full follow-up on all of the information available and look at what the medical experts who dealt with that death had to say about what the cause was. You know, kind of how the researchers did it in the paper that I showed earlier, and how researchers all over the world assess vaccine safety. You know, that is how science is done, not through social media.
If you cannot explain the result that I got, you should not approve these vaccines at this time.
So yeah, by the way, he's making these comments at a meeting where the topic of discussion is approving boosters for kids 5 to 11 years of age. And yeah, we can explain those results. The sad truth is that sudden death in children does happen. This can happen for all kinds of reasons. For example, here are the top 10 causes of child and adolescent deaths on an average year in the US. Among these are heart disease, respiratory disease, and suffocation. These things can happen very suddenly, sometimes without any prior warning, and it is devastating. I'm not surprised that some of these parents are looking for answers desperately and come to the answer that a COVID vaccine or some other vaccine killed their child. And now they're running to this charlatan, this grifter, this absolute liar, Steve Kirsch, to give him ammunition to continue his twisted mission. But Steve hasn't quite finished embarrassing himself in this comment just yet.
This time, the data I was interrupted. The data I received.
I'll give you a little extra time, Mr. Kirsch. I'll give you just a few more seconds to wrap up.
Yeah, getting that upset when someone tries to tell you that your time is up after saying some of the most stupid things ever said at these meetings isn't a good look, Steve.
Thank you, Dr. Leo. I appreciate that. The data that I received clearly shows the vaccines are doing more harm than good in this age group. There is simply no other way to explain the data. Do you want to see the data and talk to the parents before your vote today?
Your time has ended. We really appreciate it, and apologies for the interruption.
The first statement he made in his comment was wrong, and so is the last one. COVID vaccines have a very clear benefit to every single age group that they have been tested in, which is practically every age group at this point. Flashing across your screen right now are several studies that were conducted in real-world populations of children and adolescents to determine just how safe and effective COVID vaccines are at preventing severe outcomes from COVID-19 in children, such as hospitalization, multisystem inflammatory syndrome, and death. The body of work here is huge, and it involves hundreds, if not thousands, of scientists working very closely with these data on a daily basis, reporting their findings to the scientific community, having those findings be scrutinized by the scientific community, and having them still hold up. This is all the kind of work that the members of the committee that Steve is commenting to are very familiar with or have even done themselves. But Steve has this grandiose millionaire delusion of his own ideas, that he has to be the one who is right, that he has to be the one with the answers. It's complete lack of respect for expertise and complete delusion on his part that drives him to do this kind of thing. But luckily, at the end of all this, the committee unsurprisingly did not listen to Steve and decided to approve booster shots for the 5 to 11 age group in the US, which is a very good thing because all of the evidence right now points to COVID vaccines being a 3-dose series. But I don't think Steve has the slightest understanding of any of these data. He is so caught up in his own hubris that he goes in front of a committee of vaccine experts and tells them, "This is how science is done." I mean, he might as well have gone to a gymnastics conference, looked Sunisa Lee right in the eye and said, "Hey, you loser, I got out of bed this morning, and that is how you be an athlete." It's just delusional. Anyway, if you want to read about all of the science that I've talked about in this video, all of the papers that I've mentioned or had flashed across the screen are going to be linked in the description below so that you can do your own reading for yourself and try to understand the data a little bit better than Steve Kirsch, which is not a hard challenge. Anyways, that's going to do it for this week's video. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to catch me next week, where I'll be debunking some more funky stuff. See you then.